Hello, my name is Kimberly Smith, and I'm blessed to be the Executive Director for Johnson County Senior Services.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I was so inspired when I heard a little bit of your story, and we're working to preserve stories here in Johnson County. We're going to start with, what's the biggest change that you've seen in Johnson County?
I think the excessive growth. 47 years ago, in the basement of a little church in Franklin, a group of concerned citizens got together to determine what the greatest challenge older adults were facing. At that time, it was the need for transportation. And if you fast forward 47 years, the greatest challenge continues to be the need for transportation. So for nearly 5 decades, we've been the only free door-to-door transportation provider, transporting to life-saving treatment, medical and non-medical. And with those numbers, they continue to grow exponentially over the last 14 years that I have been here. But for 47 years, it is incredible the growth we're seeing in our community.
When we stopped by just to hear a little bit more about your cause and what you guys are doing, you shared a little bit just about your exponential growth and your move over to this building and just some of the amazing things that took place along the way. Could you share just a little bit of that story?
Sure. So we were, prior to coming to this location in the fall of 2020, we were in a building that was donated to us. It was a house that was built in 1855, and it was the Franklin College admission office. And they physically moved it down to South State Street in Franklin. And we were there for many, many years. The word we were allowed to use, it was a compromised building. It had many issues, and we had outgrown this space so much that we were limited on how many seniors we could actually serve. So we had begun praying for 7 full years, which took us straight to the global pandemic, 2020. And there was a piece of property on Tracy Road across from Break a Day Elementary. And as I continued to pass that road, there was a sign out front that said Future Home of Crosswinds Church. And I knew the church was no longer. And I reached out to Pastor Mark Van Diemen and asked if he had ever thought about selling just a couple of acres. We didn't have a lot of money because the seniors truly are the most underfunded, underserved, and most unappreciated precious souls in our county. And there wasn't capital campaign money, so it was just us saving money over the 7 years. And on the Monday morning, I called him. He said, "I can't believe you're calling me this morning, because just yesterday, Sunday, after church, the elders and we decided we would sell 2 acres. And as he told me how much, I said, as reasonable as that may be, I don't know if it is or not, I'm sure it was, but we don't have that money. So I just asked him to continue to pray that the Lord would work something out for us. It could be a pre-existing building, it could be property, it could be anywhere in the county, because as a not-for-profit, we just needed to be located in this area. A week later, Pastor Mark called me back and he said, "I can't sleep." He said, "I've been in your creepy little building." And at that time, it was sinking, it was leaning. There were areas of that building that was compromised from being moved. And he said, "We feel the Lord calling us to bless you with 1.33 acres as a gift unto the Lord." So that is how the property happened. But then, just days after that, we received a call from 2 mighty men of God who'd been kind of following our story and knowing what we were looking for. One, a fine remodeling home builder, and another one was a commercial developer who was ending up being a town manager for a couple of the towns in our county. And they said, "We feel the Lord leading us to help you. If you find a pre-existing building or property, please let us know. We will call in every favor we can. We will reach out to anybody we want to Bible study with, anybody at all that has a gifting that can assist in getting you in a building. We would love to do that." That was Mike Ducate and Dan Cartwright. So as that was happening, immediately they started working to get an excavator and an architect. And thankfully, on July 3rd of 2020, during a global pandemic, we broke ground, which is our current location, 36 West, 600 North, Tracy Road in Whiteland. And as a result of that, when we broke ground, we needed $200,000 to get floors, walls into this building. And we broke ground on faith. And 3 days after we broke ground, an elderly woman walked into our little building in Franklin, and she said, "Here." And I always get teary telling this story because it's such a faith story. And there was a note that said, "Sis, here is a check. Write it for whatever you see fit, love, your rich brother." And she said, "How much do you want me to write it for?" And I said, "Ooh, I cannot tell you how much to write it for, but let's just take it to the master. Let's just pray and see what God puts on your heart." So I am praying my head off. And of course, I'm a crybaby anyway, and tears are streaming down my face. And I said, "Let's just see if the Lord put anything on your heart." She said he did. She said, "I have to write this check for $100,000. And I said, "Let me get my dispatcher, Kathy, in here." So I'm calling Kathy into my office because it said on there text only. And she said, "My brother's in his late 80s. He is hearing impaired, but he would want to know, and we'll just get final approval." And I said, "That is no problem at all." And she said, "Do you know how to text?" And I said, "I do. I know how to text." She said, "Will he get that next week sometime?" And I said, "No, he'll get it right away if he has his phone." So I texted and I said, "Your sweet sister's in my office. She felt the Lord leading her to write this check for $100,000. I promise I will do nothing with it but put it in the safe until I hear from you." He texted back immediately and he said, "That is perfectly fine. I happen to be at my home in Fort Myers, Florida right now. So can I please get 3 days so I can get with my bank in Franklin?" And I said, "Absolutely. How would you like to be recognized?" And he said, "I want no recognition at all, but my sweet sister can." So I said to her, "He doesn't want to be recognized. How would you like to be recognized?" And she said, "No, no, no. Only my Heavenly Father gets credit for this." Then 3 days later, an elderly man walked into our same building in Franklin. I had never met him before. And he said, "My beloved of 65 years just got called home to be with the Lord." He said she loved dogs and she loves seniors. So the dogs are getting $5,000 and I have a gift for you. And he slid an envelope across the table. And I said, "You want me to open it?" And he said, "I wish you would." And as you can guess, the amount of that check was the remaining $100,000 that we needed. So that is how we got into this building. Of course, we didn't have furniture we could bring in here because a lot of it had mold on it and different things and really old. And I got a call that same week. Christian from Aspire Johnson County Economic Development called and he said, "We're moving into a brand new building and we're going to be purchasing new furniture. Would you like to come and see if you want any of our old furniture?" And the answer was yes, please, and thank you. And that is where so much of the furniture in this building came from. And then Cummins reached out and said, "We heard that you were going to need a boardroom table." They had a warehouse full, so they donated that. And everything in this building, step by step, was all a gift. From the time we broke ground to the time we moved in, it was 4 months and 2 weeks, which took us 2 days before Thanksgiving in 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic, without one single delay and without us owing one single penny. And even after being here a couple of days, of course, we didn't have blinds because there were no budget whatsoever for blinds on our windows. And a man walked in and then he said, "I noticed none of your windows are covered." And we said, "No, there's certainly not a budget for that. We're just so thankful to be in the building." And he said, "I own a blind and window company across 31. He said, "I'll send my guy over to get measurements." And 2 days later, every single window was covered in this building. There are so many stories I could tell you from how it started to it finished. But I will say in this current building, with all of the services that we provide, we take care of 8,700 seniors a month, which is a huge blessing.
Amazing story of our community truly coming together. Our goal is to kind of capture those stories where our community really is coming together. I know that you helped to serve seniors. I know that you helped during the pandemic with just food needs. I know you've helped in times tragedy after tornado. Can you think of other times where you've really seen our community come together? I know you just recently just did an Amazon wish list, and that
We
was amazing
did.
to see.
Yes, and that has happened more than once. Just when there's a disparity somewhere, and it doesn't even have to be with seniors, just in general, our community is so incredible about rising to the call of the needs. And as you mentioned, Rachel, the food pantry was one of them. A few weeks ago, we were down to 0 boxes of macaroni and cheese, no soup, and many, many other things that we were completely out of. And one simple post on Facebook on a Sunday evening brought so many people in, beginning that Monday and every day after. We continued to get Amazon deliveries and people walking in who graciously went to the grocery store. And now our pantry is so stocked for us to continue to take care of the multitude, which is not only seniors. We help absolutely anyone in need and at risk without any questions asked.
Wonderful. You're doing wonderful, amazing work. I know you couldn't do it without the community. I'm curious what kind of legacy you hope to leave behind.
I think we are seeing it in progress, actually, the growth. The last couple of years, the population for older adults in our community increased 51%. In the next 2 years, we will have more seniors in Johnson County than school-age kids from preschool through the senior year of high school. With that comes great needs. So my hope is that the agency would continue to grow, would continue to flourish as we continue to make a positive impact in the lives of so many that are truly suffering in silence.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like future generations or other people to know about Johnson County?
I think it's important to know that every single cent counts, every single minute of your time counts. And it makes my heart so sad when seniors are calling me and they're eating dog food and they're not eating for days and they're choosing between food and medicine and they're being scammed and they're being abused. And my heart is that people surely don't know that this is happening, because if it were, would we not stand firmer? Would we not rise up for them to make sure that everything that they've done for us, they paved the way, our seniors, our veterans, so we could live a better life? And I would hope that the future generations and all of us that continue to live in this community would rise up on their behalf.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing and for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much, Rachel.